Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content that I'm making, please click that subscribe button. Also remember to click that bell button and make sure to tick that box to send all notifications so you don't miss out on any videos. With that in mind, let's get on with the video. What's up guys, welcome to Munchkins Gaming, where we take your gaming to the next level. This is Munchkins logging in to bring you another episode of Adventures Chat Log. This week's topic is Final Fantasy XIV getting easier? This topic comes from the official forums, and I will leave the link in the description down below if you are interested in the original poster's point of view. To answer the question directly, no, Final Fantasy XIV is not getting easier. Do you know a lot of people actually clearing Ultimate Coil? Nope. Only the hardcore of the hardcores are able to beat that, and the eye level syncing doesn't help from what I hear, since materials will be cancelled off if you go in at a higher eye level. So it's best to go in probably in your 345 gear, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So if you know something, you can leave it in the description down below and let me know if this is actually true. But for those people who are new to Final Fantasy XIV, or people who came in during Storm's Blood, let me tell you a story of old. When Final Fantasy XIV first came out, the raid release at the time was the Unending Coil of Bahamut. These raid tiers were quite tough, especially the first big boss, Twintanya, and the second big boss, Nail, which are the end bosses for the first and second raid tier respectively. Bahamut himself was an okay boss, but he wasn't necessarily harder than the first two. The first two, it took a lot of figuring out before you can actually beat these monsters, and they were quite unforgiving as well. In between the A Realm Reborn patches, a savage version of T5 to T9 raids were released, and these were the ultimate hardcore at the time. I mean, these fights are still extremely difficult if you're level sync the fight. So think of this as the Ultimate Coil that was released a few patches ago. Now, at the end of the Realm Reborn, people wanted a more challenging fight. And you know what? We got it. A raid tier that was a lot of DPS checks, and you need godly connections between all of your raid group to do the mechanics. And yes, I'm looking at you, Alexander Savage Floor 3. We also got a boss raid that you couldn't beat until you had a higher eye level gear than what was recommended, since the damage output was quite insane. As a result, no one could beat the whole raid in week 1. Even beating the first two bosses was an accomplishment at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the tier was beaten about 2 to 3 weeks after the initial release. You know what happened here? People complained. It was too hard. The damage was too high for the current eye level. People will always complain if it doesn't meet their expectations. So what did Square Enix do? They made the next tier a little bit more easier, and so on. By the way, I still haven't gotten my Alexander kill due to raid group reasons, but the fight I felt was way easier than the last two bosses. You can probably say, hey Monch, this sounds like more of a bad design of the fight than anything else. And yes, I would agree with you, but that doesn't remove the fact that they tried to make it harder for the players. So here we are, at the release of Storm's Blood. What should Square Enix do? Well, they learn from their mistakes. The last raid tier, while easier, it still gave a challenging fight from the third floor and up, which is for the most part what they have been doing all along. They didn't have to make the first two levels difficult like in Heaven's Ward and deny entry to their casual players because they want to keep these people playing. And if you beat a floor of Savage Raid, you feel pretty good, don't you? And it gives you this boost in confidence that you can do it. Well, that's the idea, keeping the most players as possible. I would also like to note that A5 and A6 Savage were still quite challenging, even after a lot of players complained about A1 to A4 Savage. While I do agree the last two raid tiers we had are quite easier than a Realm Reborn or in Heaven's Ward, it still kept the idea of making the third and fourth bosses difficult enough to warrant casual players to think before going in to try the fight. So you're probably thinking now, Munch, you said Final Fantasy XIV is not getting easier. And you're saying the opposite thing and you said earlier. And to you people I say, I'm not changing my answer because Shinryu EX still exists. Ultimate Coil still exists. These are here and they are part of the Stormblood patches. These fights are by no means easy. I mean, sure, some fights are a lot easier in Stormblood than others, but there are some fights that are easy even back in A Realm Reborn and in Heaven's Ward. A Realm Reborn, turn 1 to 4 were quite easy, even to the point you can cheese turn 2. And turn 3 was just a racing game between the raid group who can go there first. And turn 4 was just an elevator dungeon with no real boss. I mean, the primal fights in Heaven's Ward were quite easy as well. If anything, I would say Final Fantasy XIV has been more consistent with their difficulty than anything else, and the only outlier being the Alexander Tier 1 raid. And this was because of players wanting a more difficult dungeon. So no, Final Fantasy XIV hasn't gotten easier. It's just how its formula works. And if you try to go away from that formula, you end up with Alexander Tier 1 raid, which was made to be hard for the sake of being hard. Anyway guys, I think that's it for this video. Remember to click like, subscribe, and share this video if you find it interesting at all. As always, I'd like to hear from you guys what you think of Final Fantasy XIV, if you think it is getting easier. And if so, I'd like you to explain why you think it's getting easier, or why you think it's getting harder, or if you think that it's just the same thing. Also, remember to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter at Munchkins Gaming. This is Munchkins logging off, and I'll see you guys in the next level.